Welcome everyone to today's Skill Up session. My name's Emily Springer. I am an academic learning specialist at NU, also a doctoral candidate myself, pursuing a doctorate in education and organizational leadership. And I am here today by one of the fabulous professors at NU, Dr. Gary Walker Roberts. Now, we are going to have several students and staff and faculty actually on the call today. So I would like if everyone would remain muted unless called upon. But that being said, we absolutely want you to have conversation in the chat and ask questions in the Q&A. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me in the chat. I'm happy to help you out. That being said, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Gary Walker Roberts. Dr. Gary is someone at NU who is passionate about student success. And I've had the privilege of being able to work alongside them as they have moved into this great work. And I'm excited for you all to see today's session. So if you need me at all, don't hesitate to find me in the chat, and I will pass this over to Dr. Gary.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was such a warm welcome. And I would like to, first of all, say thank you to you. Thanks for putting on the Skill Up series. And to your testament, absolutely, I love to help students. So today I would like to formally welcome you to the Skill Up session. And I know that you're taking an hour out of your time and day. So welcome. And again, let's get right to it. The title of the Skill Up session is Stay Focused on the Prize, Graduation, which is right around the corner for us, right? So we cannot wait to be at graduation. But perhaps you're a student that is in the course room or you're in your dissertation phase. Either way, this is a great Skill Up session for you. We're focusing on writing chapters 4 and 5 or section 3 of the Qualitative Dissertation. As Emily mentioned, I am Dr. Gary Walker Roberts. I am a professor at National University in the Sanford College of Education. Specifically, I teach in the Teacher Education Department, the TED department. I'm a dissertation chair, subject matter expert, and the lead for NU's online teaching and learning specialization. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Emily, of course, and who is soon to be Dr. Emily, Dr. Maggie Broderick, who is my chair, and she is here today to help and assist, and Dr. Linda Bloomberg, who I revered when I was a student because we all read Dr. Bloomberg's article and use them in our dissertation. Both of those professors, chairs, and SMEs are here today, and they're going to help respond to the chat. So like Emily said, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We are here to really help you, and we want to answer all questions. And this is a heavy one. This is a chapter 4 and 5 and section 3. So we're going to keep the content moving, but like Emily said, we will send the slide deck out to you and the recording. I love this bullseye here, right? So we aim to hit the center of the bullseye for all of the deliverables in chapters 4 and 5 or section 3. So we'll talk about that today. So keep your eye and keep your focus on the prize. So let's go over the agenda. Today's agenda, we are going to review chapters 4 and 5 and section 3 dissertation templates, headings. And I'm also going to use my arrow, right, like with that bullseye to kind of guide us through this presentation. So hopefully you can see my arrows. If you could put a thumbs up or say yes in the chat, that would be great. We also are going to review examples of dissertations to see how they meet the expected deliverables. And you may hear a lot on some of the questions, it depends. Well, it depends, meaning because we work with committee members, we are collaborative, and you want to really rely on what your committee members are stating with their feedback in chapters 4 and section 3 to make sure that you're meeting those deliverables. I am just one chair, I am just one SME. I'm going to present from that lens today, but we have fantastic chairs and SMEs and professors at National University that may have a different way of getting to meet those deliverables. So really, really partner with your committee members and your professors. I'm also going to share pro tips. So look out for these pro tips, and I will explain when to elevate the participant's voice and when the researcher's voice can be elevated. Why don't I start out with one right now? A pro tip. Teams win. The doctoral journey is collaborative. And that's something I love to say to students that we're here for you. We do have a team that's there for you. We have the Academic Success Center, the library, the Commons, and your committee team. So please lean on all of us, just as you are today with Dr. Broderick and Dr. Bloomberg in the chat and myself and Emily. So it's a big team with your help to get to, or to help you get to those deliverables. So let's jump right in. So where do you find the dissertation templates? Well, there are two in the School of Education. We have the 3-section template and we have the 5-chapter template. You can find the 3-section template in the Apply Doctoral Center, which is right here on the left of your screen. And you can find the 5-chapter template in the DC or the Dissertation Center, which is to the right. I have these arrows again with the theme of hitting in the bullseye. You want to arrow right to or bullseye right to the template that you will be using in your doctoral journey. I've also put the links here. Perhaps Dr. Bloomberg or Dr. Broderick could put this link in the chat so it's live and you could just click on it and you can find your dissertation template.
Dr. Gary, fear not, we've got you covered in the chat.
Perfect. I can't see, so that's awesome. Thank you so much. And you might be wondering, am I 3-section template or 5-chapter template? So what I would like to show you is the side-by-side template headings. So the 3-section template, you will know that you're in the 3-section, using the 3-section template if you're in the dissertation sequence courses that start with 9914. You will know that you are using the 5-chapter template if you are in the dissertation sequence that start with 9904. So you want to look for those numbers to know which template you should be using. And I just want to put a pro tip out there. They are different. So if you are using a dissertation that is published in ProQuest, where you can find in the library, make sure that you're using the correct template that is germane to your dissertation phase, whether that's 9914 or 9904. What I would like you to do is notice the headings. Do you see the headings? So you have the title heading, but underneath the title heading, you'll find the headings. So there they are. You could see them side by side. They're a bit different, right? Section 3 has the headings that are findings, evaluation of the outcomes. And then if you look to the 5-chapter, you see that there's 2 chapters, chapter 4 and chapter 5, and you will see the headings underneath those that you will work with in your template. The first heading that we're going to go over are findings. You'll see that in the 3 section, it is findings, and in the 5-chapter, it's results. So they are there. Let me go back one so you can see what I'm describing. So you could see findings in the 3 section, and in the 5-chapter, you see findings, and it starts right out with trustworthiness of data and results. So you see how that happens here. You have 2 different headings here, but it's those will also just go under findings. Those deliverables will go under the findings in the 3 section. So as we talk about them collectively, I want you to see that the trustworthiness of data is a heading in the 5-chapter, and results is a heading in the 5-chapter. But again, just to show you, it is all under findings in the 3 section. So under findings. Trustworthiness of data. So what are the deliverables for the trustworthiness of data? You know that there are 4 criteria that you have to satisfy, which are the credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. You want to make sure that you are writing to each of those and really explaining what it is and why you're doing it, why you've solicited the criteria to help you with trustworthiness of data. Just to remember a little pro tip here, validity is to quantitative research, whereas trustworthiness is to qualitative. Validity is actually found factually sound. So validity is factual. So think about quantitative with data that and using an instrument to really make sure that the validity is met. Well, there is no real factual soundness using an instrument in qualitative. As we know, according to Bloomberg, the researcher is the instrument. So we are the instrument in the qualitative data, and we collect that data. So we have to prove that our data is trustworthy. And how we do that is by putting in these criteria. In the results, you want to make sure that you're providing descriptive summary and participant demographic characteristics. And you want to really only explain the results per the research questions. You want to objectively, not subjectively, but objectively report the findings, the results, which are the themes, without discussion, interpretation, or speculation. You want thick, rich data from the participants, which are the direct quotes, to uphold those themes. Another pro tip, uphold the themes with the majority of participants' voices. So the participants that you're in your study, in order to get the codes to develop the theme, you want to make sure that you have a majority of voices that are upholding the theme. And you'll see that in some of the dissertations where it's 10 out of 10 participants contributed to this theme, or 6 out of 10 participants, but you should not see 2 out of 10 participants, right? That really wouldn't be a theme. So here are some tips, some more tips. So with in SCOE in education, you can revisit your course EDR 8206, lesson 6, where we are introduced to Bloomberg and Volpe 2019 article, which talks about trustworthiness of data. So when you're in your dissertation phase, always remember you can go back to your courses to really find out how you can write about these headings, and also to meet these deliverables. Another really good tip I'd like to give you is to temper your voice during these headings, during this part of the dissertation template, and really elevate the participants' voices. And you elevate the participants' voices by using those direct quotes. Add that meaningful, rich data to your themes with your participants' direct quotes. Avoid editorialization and or interpretation or speculation. And I have an example here. Tom and Tina both insinuated, right? Insinuated means that they hinted to. You're making that speculation, right? So you don't want to speculate. You want to really concrete the upholding of the themes with those direct quotes. And here are some examples. So again, the trustworthiness of data heading is in chapter 4 of the 5 chapter, and the trustworthiness of data is found under the findings heading in section 3. Establish that trustworthiness, here is the heading, and this is how the student establishes the trustworthiness. And then they go into the specific criterion. And a criterion that I pulled out was credibility. As you can see, they're using Bloomberg 2023 to really define what credibility is. And then they talk about how did they meet that criterion? How did they meet the criterion of credibility? Through triangulation and through member checking. So you could see that this student, actually, it is 2B, Dr. Heidi says, I achieved triangulation by. So they define what it is, and then they talk about how they satisfied that criterion. So make sure that you are satisfying that deliverable exactly the way this example is spelled out for you. Here is an example of the participants' descriptive summary and demographic table. So now you get to pull in some of your great expertise with tables. So a pro tip is to use the Academic Success Center to really make sure that your tables are APA formatted. As you can see on the left, we have participants' demographic information in a table form. So you see the demographics here listed out, and then you see that it correlates with the written descriptive summary. So you could see Riley here, you could see Riley here. So you are putting in writing what you're showing or illustrating in a table. I like both because I like to visually see it and then I like to read about it. So, that's again something that you could work with your committee, with your chair, but I wanted to show you both the table and the written. Here are some examples of thick descriptions of participants' quotes and the thematic table. A pro tip, uphold themes with direct quotes. So I've already kind of spoke about that already. But here it is an example. So table 4, you can see that the majority of participants contributed to the theme. Do you see how this is Dr. Gigi? Dr. Gigi is saying 10 out of 10 participants contributed to this theme, which is to the left, theme 1A. And actually, Dr. Gigi goes this one step further and puts the participants' names of whom upheld that theme. So I love that descript of that table to really describe a visual representation of the participants' descriptions. Then you have on the other side the participants' direct quotes and their experiences that uphold the theme. So these are rich and thick data with direct quotes. And remember, in this section or under this heading, you want to make sure that your voice is not creeping in. You want to make sure that you're actually upholding this theme or your themes with rich, thick data with direct quotes. Now we could move to the evaluations of the outcomes or the findings. So in the 5-chapter template checklist, you will see I have the checklist here. You can actually go through and check them. And in the 3-section template, this is the checklist. I kind of highlighted some similarities, but there are a little nuanced differences there. But in the 5-chapter and 3-section, you are going to organize the discussion by research question, which you'll see in the example. You're going to evaluate the outcomes and the findings by going back to your literature review and really revisiting your theoretical or conceptual framework. So you want to really make sure that you go back to chapter 2 or go back to section 1 and really look at existing research. And then you're going to evaluate and see, do your findings uphold or are in parallel or align or in lockstep or diverge perhaps? Maybe there's a new finding with what you spoke about or wrote about in your literature review. I love this one, like really providing potential explanations of unexpected or divergent results. I think that's really great. If you exhausted the literature, but then you found a theme that you really didn't read in the literature, that's a new finding. That's awesome. And that's where here's where you really want to talk about that. Here are some of my tips. The researcher's voice is still not heard yet, right? You're not putting your voice in yet. The researcher is only evaluating on the outcomes and the findings. Again, use words like lockstep, parallel, align, converge, or diverge. Report those unexpected or surprising results. They're new outcomes, they're findings. These are great, valuable additions to your field of study, and really you can go out and champion after you've printed or published your dissertation and really share that with your field. Now I'd like to show you some examples. So let's look at the examples that I have for you. And again, one of the pro tips that I like to say here, engage with the literature. Go back to your literature review and really see, where did my themes parallel, align with the literature that's already existing out there? And or where was there a surprise? As you can see in Dr. Gigi's, I have the surprise. She had a surprise. It was surprising to see the emergence of a fifth theme. And she talks about the emergence of the fifth theme that she did not see in her literature review. However, on the left-hand side, you'll see that Dr. Michelle talks about the findings that they align, and they use the word align twice here. This aligns with prior research, as such as XYZ, and then you can explain how does it align, how does it stay in lockstep. So that's how you want to talk about the example, the evaluations of the outcomes and findings in your dissertation. So we'll move into implications and recommendations for practice, but I'd like to take a pause here and bring Emily back in. I can't see the chat, so I'm not sure if the chat has been a buzz.
It's
But
it's been a buzz.
questions? Oh, good, good. I love it when the chat is a buzz.
First of all, I want to thank Dr. Bloomberg and Dr. Broderick. There's been some really insightful conversations about different questions that are going on in the chat. There's a couple that I want to mention just while we're on captured in the recording, because I think they're absolutely worth mentioning. Let me scroll here. Someone did ask a question about participant demographics, but the population demographics they teach. And then Dr. Bloomberg pointed to how you would show the demographics of the sample participants.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated you taking the time to kind of show a good example of a table of what that looks like. I'm going to keep scrolling down. If there are other thoughts you have about the table as well too, because I don't know if you're going to dive into that later, but if you have other thoughts on the significance and I guess the importance of the table throughout section 3 or in chapter 5, feel free, Dr. Gary, to jump in there.
Sure. One thing that I will point out, if we went back to that slide,
Great.
um, if you see, we have my students do gender neutral pseudonyms, which gives an added layer of confidentiality, but also helps to make sure that we are being inclusive in our dissertation writing. So I do like that that you pointed that out, Emily. If there was anything that I'd like to point out, so these are gender neutral pseudonyms. I also like names, like, and again, work with your committee, work with your chair, but I prefer to have pseudonyms versus numbers like participant 1 or participant 2. I feel that we're helping tell a story in qualitative research, and we're telling the truths of our participants. So I like to really use a name versus a number. Again, that's a preference, but I just feel giving a name to a participant versus a number just makes them feel more humanized. So that's another little example or a pro tip that I like to share.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gary. And someone also mentioned, while we're on the topics of pro tip, how to avoid overdoing it with direct quotes, right? With those thick descriptions. And because you can't see the chat, I want to mention Dr. Bloomberg mentioned to work with your chair and
Yeah.
present the parts of quotes that are directly relevant to the theme. And then Dr. Broderick had some really great advice as well there. Anything else that you might want to kind of tune in on the overdoing it with quotes?
Yeah, I think they both hit the nail on the head here. It again, it depends, right? What I was saying. It depends. Really partner with your chair, partner with your committee, and find that balance. So I do like to say that. The other way that I explain it is like, you know, you're displaying exhibits. This is the theme. This is how I came up with the theme through these codes and schemas. And here's exhibit A, here's exhibit B, right? So you're just presenting how they added value to those themes. So if the block quote is not germane to that theme, then you can eliminate part of the direct quote that's not germane and just use eclipse dot dot dot. But that lets us know that something was taken out there and you stayed really true to that theme. But also, you member checked. So you member checked and showed the participant that part of the quote that you're using to uphold the theme, and they're giving you a thumbs up like, yes, that's what I meant. You're not taking me out of context and trying to, be dishonest here. So, the member checking is very important with that as well if you use the ellipse.
Dr. Geary, when you mentioned this, when you had this response to this question that I just asked, almost simultaneously, Dr. Bloomberg said the same thing in the chat. So great minds think alike. That's all we have to cover for right now. But if anyone
Perfect.
does have questions, please don't hesitate. I know we have experts in the chat, but we can also take them as we pause throughout today's session.
Fantastic. Well, we'll venture into the second half, which is fun because the researcher's voice will start to come into play here. So let's talk about implications and recommendations for practice. So implications are synonymous to conclusions and or likely consequences. Right. So you're going to organize the discussion around each research question individually, support all the conclusions or consequences, right, with some findings from the study, rely on the theme table as a guidance, right? So this is where you can go back to the theme table and make sure these connects with your implications. You're going to present the results in the study by describing how they address the study problem and purpose, of course, and then what conclusions or consequences are happens in society or a desired societal outcome, which you'll see in the example. The recommendation for practice, you're going to discuss recommendations, right? Based on the study's findings on how or what can be applied to practice and or theory. So just remember again, looking at the theme, what conclusion can you draw? And then what are your recommendations for practice? Do not overstate the applicability of the findings. And I'll give you some examples of that as well. So you want to avoid absolutes, right? Like at all cost, avoid them. Like must or will, like, you want to suggest something, but you also don't want to overdo it by saying, if the university implements coaches, all students will graduate. Well, you don't know that, right? So you don't want to talk in those absolutes or be overstating any of the applicable findings. And here are some of my tips. So the researcher's voice is not heard in the implications, the conclusions. You can use words again like lockstep, parallel, or converge to report unexpected results, the same as what we talked about before. But the researcher's voice can now be heard in the recommendations for practice. So now you get to bring your voice into the dissertation to give those recommendations. So let's see how that plays out in some examples. So implications and recommendations for practice in the 3-section, a pro tip, they happen in tandem. In the 5-chapter, they are separated. So just know that in tandem for the 3-section. And here you'll see them presented in tandem in both the theme table or in the table presentation on the right. But I want to show you how the theme table transfers into how you can create your implications and recommendations for practice. So let's look at the table. So here you can see Dr. Michelle has a theme that social and behavioral functions, social, emotional, and behavioral functions with safety and belonging and behavior concerns and increased stress. That is a theme. Let's look at what her implication is from that theme. Bullying and cyberbullying contribute negatively to African American female high school students' emotional well-being, academic performance, and behavior. She's drawing this conclusion from what the participants said during the interviews and contributed to this theme and sub-themes. So you can see it paralleling, upholding, all of those great words that I discussed here, that it's social emotional well-being with safety and belonging, and then behavior concerns and increased stress, academic performance, and behavior. So you've got them paralleling each other in from theme to implication. Now your voice is heard here. So let's hear Dr. Michelle's voice. Recommendation for practice. Assistant principals should implement restorative practices to foster empathy and understanding. So she is saying, based on the findings and based on the conclusion of those findings, she's now saying a recommendation for assistant principals, what they should do. She's not saying that they must do this. And she's also not overstating and saying bullying will end if assistant principals do implement restorative practices. So do you see the difference there? She's not saying bullying will end and be over. Wouldn't that be great? But she's adding valuable information to the field by suggesting that assistant principals should implement restorative practices to foster empathy and understanding. So do you see how that plays out from the findings and the theme to the implication to the recommendation of practice? Let's take a look at the second one, which is for the 5 chapter. So implication and recommendations for the 5 chapter, the pro tip is that they are presented separately. So as you can see, the table on the left has the implications, and the table on the right has the recommendations for practice. So what you want to do, and again, look, we've moved to chapter 5. So we've moved out of chapter 4 and we've moved into chapter 5. You could do the same thing. You could go to this, to who's this? Dr. Heidi's. Go to the theme table, take a look at what the theme for research question 1 was, see how Dr. soon to be Dr. Heidi is drawing the implication, right? Drawing that conclusion. There is no clear definition, expectations of marketing or marketing of academic coaching. So that's the implication. Let's see what her voice for the recommendation for practice. Institutions can enhance the utilization of academic coaching by creating a clear definition of coaching and promoting the resource throughout the institution. Ah, do you see how that happens? The flow? But again, they are presented separately in chapter 5. Here it is in the written form. So I want you to see in tandem in section 3, you see research question A, research question here, implication A. Then you see recommendation 1, research question 2, and then recommendation 2. Research 2, implication B with recommendation 2. So do you see how that flows in tandem with one another? Then if you look to the right-hand side, you will see that they are separated. So underneath the table, you have research question 1, implication A, and I shortened it just so you could see, how it's flowing. Then you see implication B. And then you see it at different sections, see how there's a page break here because they're not together, they're separated. And then you'll see recommendation 1 based on implication A. So I'm going to take a little bit of a pause because that's a lot. So again, the written examples, if you're in section 3, you're writing them in tandem, one right after another in the same, under the same heading. And then if you're in the 5 chapter, you're separating your implications and you're separating them from your recommendations. And then you'll see that they're written in two separate areas under two separate headings. Great. We'll keep pushing on to recommendations of for future research. One of my favorites. So in the 5-chapter template checklist in chapter 5, so we've moved out of chapter 4, now we're in chapter 5. And in the 3-section template, we have the checklist here as well. And that will be in the same section, right? So you didn't move out of a chapter, you're staying right in the same 3 section. If you look, here's my little pro tip. It looks like the 3 deliverables align perfectly in this area, which I love. It made this presentation a little bit easier, so I didn't have to have too many different deliverables that were not quite the same, but that's what you get when you embark on a 5-chapter or a 3-section. You're going to discuss how future researchers can improve upon the study that you just completed and given its limitations. You're also going to explain what the next logical step in this line of research is. And as doctoral candidates, right, we are novice researchers, and we've read plenty of peer-reviewed journal articles, and the majority of them end with future research needs to be in this area, right? That's how we find the gap. And we present the gap in chapter 1 or section 1. So now you get a turn at really being that researcher to say more research needs to be done and why. Also, just remember, as a doctoral candidate, you are showing your competency. So you want to really go back to the characteristics of a qualitative or a quantitative study, and you want to go back to the characteristics of the design. Remember the 3 methodologies: qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method. And then the designs fall underneath there, which could be anything from a correlational design for a quantitative method, or perhaps like a phenomenological design under the qualitative. So you are proving your competence in understanding the difference between methodology and the 3 methodologies, and your competency with design and understanding which design falls underneath the category of the methodology. So you'll see that kind of play out in the explanation. My pro tips are to choose the research methodology and design that you rejected earlier in the dissertation. So if you think about it, go back to, chapter 3 and section 1 or 2, section 2, where you rejected the methodology and design. And I know that Dr. Broderick and Dr. Bloomberg are putting in the chat, help me out here. I believe I have it right there that it is in section 2 and chapter 3, where, the student, the doctoral candidate is rejecting a methodology and design. So choose that because you already talked about those characteristics and why you rejected them. And then also the researcher is demonstrating the competency to understand those nuances. So just make sure that you're, able to click the box on each of these 3 deliverables so that you can get a meets expectations. And then the researcher's voice is heard in this section. So here we are. We're going to end the chapter 5 and the section 3 with your voice again. Keep this section really clean and crisp. You're basically showing off your skills and your knowledge that you gained at National University through your program and through the dissertation process. So here's some examples. So the example of the recommendations for future research. Let's look at the table first. Now, this is a chair committee, certainly student doctoral candidate preference. I like it. I love a visual. A good visual is always great. And it really helps to develop and craft the written part of it. If you look, there's 3 recommendations for future studies. Look at the logical next step that is being presented in the table with the purpose and also in the written part of it. And the recommendation study builds upon the study that you just completed. Now, I have my students really choose a quantitative because they usually, because we're writing a qualitative a study or dissertation, that they go back and they choose that quantitative that they rejected and explain why, right? Why? So it's nice to see that if you did a qualitative with a appropriate design, then maybe something more numerical could, or data, factual data worthy, could uphold your qualitative dissertation. So as you can see, this study, Dr. or soon to be Dr. Heidi, she chose two quantitative. I was like really surprised and was like, wow, good for you, Heidi, and she chose the correlational design and the longitudinal design of quantitative. And then you could see juxtaposed on the right-hand side where she writes it out and justifies why she chose those methodology and design. Awesome. So now what we'll do is I want to talk to you about after meeting all of those deliverables in the 5 chapter or the 3 section, your next step is defense, right? So after Oh, and after you got your chair, your SME, and your AR to approve your entire manuscript, you head to the oral defense. And now I've done a skill up session thanks to Emily's expertise in this area, and it's called the 3 Ps that prepare doctoral candidates for a successful oral defense. Here are some bullets. Log in and ensure your internet is working. So these are just some best practices as you head to your oral defense. Be seated at your presentation location 20 minutes before your performance time to make sure that your internet's good, you're in a quiet space, you're practicing sharing your presentation on Zoom, advancing the slides. Em and I did that today before we jumped on this as well. Have water. I have my water right here, and a beverage handy that you can take a break and decompress for a moment and then carry on. Breathe and have fun. I think that's the most important part. So please catch my Skill Up session on the 3 Ps that prepare doctoral candidates for a successful oral defense. And my next slide, we're going to acknowledge the 3 examples of the dissertations. And by the way, a pro tip from me and from many, many chairs is that you can go to the library, the NU library, and find published dissertations. Now, here's some caveats and pro tips. Make sure you're choosing the most current, right? The most current 2000 or 2025, because those are the most current templates that we are using. So, don't go back years and years because the template may have changed. Also, if you are in your coursework and you haven't been assigned your dissertation committee, as soon as you find out who your dissertation committee is, run right to the library and look up those dissertations because those students met the deliverables to become doctor, and that's your aim. So you want to see what are the nuances that they have their students. Do they do tables or is it just written descriptions? Like you can go and see how that chair, that committee member works in the dissertation process. So I'd like to thank Dr. Gigi. Dr. Gigi's was used in the presentation today, and she's already defended. She will be at graduation, so excited for Dr. Gigi. And then we have doctoral candidate Heidi Rayner and doctoral candidate Michelle Ballard, who are both defending in the next couple weeks, March 26th, you can see, and March 28th. So they are defending. I felt comfortable using their examples because they have been all approved by the entire committee to move forward, including their academic readers. And as you can see, I have the oral defense dates. You can join oral defenses now. Now it's really heavy because the doctoral candidates are trying to earn their doctoral degrees to go to graduation. So now's a really good time to get in there and watch people defend and see what the expectations are. If you've been assigned a chair and you're in the process, go to your chair's defenses and see how they conduct the oral defense. It helps to really temper some nerves. So thank you to all three of them. If you can make the oral defense, that's great. Come in and cheer soon to be Dr. Heidi on, soon to be Dr. Michelle on, and also soon to be Dr. Emily on as well. So maybe at the end you can share your defense date coming up if it's scheduled, or maybe if not, we can send it out. So see you at graduation after your defense, doctor, like wings up. So I love to end with this quote from Dr. Bloomberg. And next time I should have her read it, because Dr. Bloomberg is the author of the Completing Your Qualitative Dissertation. And we use a lot of Dr. Bloomberg's work. She is an expert in qualitative study and a great scholar to have on staff as a faculty member, and you can really work with her. Maybe some of you have had her in class, but she states in the book, you have just completed a rigorous piece of research, so your research apprenticeship is ending. The defense marks this transition as you are invited to sit at the table and talk about your research as a peer with your professors. And I love that because I have the privilege of doing this every single day now that I've crossed the finish line, thanks to my chair, Dr. Broderick's wonderful guidance, and also the tutelage of Dr. Bloomberg. And as you can see, we really want to give back after we earn our degree. And on the left-hand side, these are my scholars that have graduated, and they are on the National University alumni page, but they walked in graduation last year. And I love to elevate my students because they do become peers and they become publishers, and we work with them all of the time. So again, that's why I acknowledge the three dissertations that I use today, because they are now my peers as they earn their doctorate degree. So let's get to graduation. Wings up, everybody. And I hope you found today to be very, very helpful. And let's have a roundtable discussion or any questions, Emily. We have
Right.
about 10 minutes left.
Yes. Yes. So let's see. First of all, if you do have a question, please do put it in the chat. We've had some really great discussion and some questions addressed already in the chat. I do know there's a couple of things that did come up. And of course,
Okay.
you're sharing your experience from the School of Education, and that's fabulous. I do want all of our participants to know that we are going to include in my follow-up email to you, which will have the recording and the PowerPoint from today. So you can go ahead and like slow down on those screens, take a look at some of those examples. But I'll also point to our the other templates that are available, for example, the Doctorate of Marriage and Family Therapy
Um,
templates, and then the
I
school.
can share again, Em, and go
Oh,
to
great.
let's do this. Like we can go from the beginning again.
No
Let's
worries. Yeah.
go like they're right here. So
Yes. Thank
let's
you.
see. There you go.
Yes, because this
So,
did come up a couple times, like, hey, is
yeah.
this apply for the School of Business? And it just depends if you're going to be going the applied route or if you're going the PhD route. So I will make sure to highlight that in my follow-up email to everyone. But
Fantastic.
this has just been like, this has been a skill up that has been asked by popular demand. And I also noticed that, like, if there's something that came up in today's session that you're like, hey, I would really like to see more of just this little sliver of the dissertation, because we know it is absolutely a journey to complete it. Um, Please don't hesitate to reach out to me and say, hey, I'd like to see this as a skill up, or do you have this additional resource that might be helpful? So when I send out a follow-up email, if you do want to reply there, you're welcome to. We also are collecting your feedback in survey form as well too. So you can, when today's session ends, you can provide feedback through that form as well too. I
Can I jump in? Like with
do.
that comment, I love it. Yes, am a professor in the Sanford College of Education. But please partner with your academic finance advisor to find out what template you should be using. I think that's very, very important early in your program to know that. And also, it is under the university module. If you go to the university module, you can go to find your classes that are stacked of what classes you take. If you go to that dissertation section, find out if you are in 9904 sequence, or 990 1 2 3 4 sequence, or 9914, or 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4. So the one whatever or zero whatever, that will tell you which template to follow.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we did that. There's some questions about having a lot of codes. Um, let's see.
Yeah, and you know what? I love the questions about codes, and I'm sure that people, my colleagues, have jumped in. But those are it depends, right? So we do not close the study now until you get into 9904 A, B, C, D, or 9914 A, B, C, D. And what I want you to know about that is we keep the study open with IRB in case you didn't get enough, really thick, rich data, and you may have to go back and do a couple more interviews. Maybe you don't have enough codes to really develop a strong theme. That is okay. Partner with your chair, partner with your SME, and if you have to go back and collect more data, that is okay. You are doctoral candidates. We are students at that phase, so forgive yourself if you have to go back and collect more data. And we've built in the other B, C, and D courses so that you can really feel comfortable about your codes and schemes to present the data.
And we realize that this resource is going to come to you at many different angles, in the sense that everyone's in a different part of their journey. So if you're at the very beginning, this is a great resource to kind of absorb the information and then come back to when it's a little bit more relevant. And then, of course, if you're living and breathing in these sections right now, this is just highly relevant and such a great resource for our students, Dr. Gary. So I really appreciate it. Lots of
Thank you.
people said thank you in the chat.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome. If there are any more questions, no. If not, I would like to show something if I can. Perfect. So a couple of just, if there's no questions, what you could look at is like the
Mhm.
virtual dissertation preparedness series. So the next one is tackling that literature review, right? Which happens in section 1 or of the 3 section, and chapter 2 of the 5 chapter. So, these are great too. You're here with us today. That means you like to come to these webinars. Then really go to see what the virtual dissertation preparedness series is all about.
We also understand there's a ton of resources given to you at different times in your journey. So again, this is adding to the great set of synchronous and asynchronous resources we offer our students. Dr. Gary, there aren't any other questions at this time. I want to thank you so much for coming and presenting. And thanks, Dr. Bloomberg and Dr. Broderick, for your expertise in the chat. And also my colleague, Jenna Johnson, for just throwing in the chat the different dissertation sequence courses. I really loved that. That was quick, and you're always so fast
Oh,
and
Jenna's here. Thank you,
knowledgeable.
Jenna.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes,
here.
Yeah, she is.
thank you so much.
And until the next time, Dr. Gary, and to all of our participants on the call, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you again.